My name is Joy, and this is my story about being a Christian who struggles with mental health. Growing up, I have never experienced life outside of a church community. My parents, I was adopted when I was 2 weeks old, and from the second I was brought into their household, it was immediately very, very faith based, very church based. I was one of those people who lived at church basically. My mom works at church. They're all day Sundays, Wednesday nights, random weekdays as well. That was such a huge part of my life, and I professed faith for the first time when I was 4 years old. I don't think I really understood obviously the gravity of faith at that point in time, but church was always a really big part of my life, and I never really felt even if I experienced things at church that made me question things or that made me feel off a little bit, it wasn't like I questioned the actions of the church or the people in the church until I was kind of older and experienced things that I felt that doesn't align with my beliefs as a Christian and my beliefs of how I believe that Jesus would treat me in this situation. And so when I got to probably around fourth grade and up, I started to really struggle with anxiety and mental health issues. Specifically with anxiety, I would get really sick and I would just get really overstimulated by a lot of big events. So my anxiety presents very physically. I'll get really I'll get a stomach ache and I'll get really shaky and anxious. And that made going on youth retreats specifically super difficult for me. It was always something that if you grew up in the church, you go to church retreats, you go to all of them. It's what you do. It's the thing of the year. And so it wasn't I was ever going to miss it, but I always felt so much dread going up to them of oh, I'm going to be around so many people. I'm going to have to deal with all of these different outside stimuli, and also in the middle of that try to actually take something of value away from this retreat. And it was really hard for many years, but once I got to middle school, 7th and 8th grade, it was getting almost unmanageable. I don't know, for other people who've gone on church retreats, my church always did these really big kind of confessional nights where there would be lots and lots of worship, and it would basically be you sit and you kind of just confess as music is playing over you. And I grew up in a mega church, so there was literally 500 kids in this chapel room from ages 12 to 18, and just emotions, loud noise, lots of crying and stress, and I couldn't handle it. So I would always be the one asking if I could leave the room or if I could go sit in the hall. And I never thought of that as something that would be treated or seen as disrespectful or something that could have been considered offensive, but always in my mind I was why am I experiencing so much anxiety when I should be feeling this wash of faith and these really deep feelings of intimacy with Christ? And I didn't feel that. I felt so overwhelmed, and my body hurt and my brain hurt. And so one of those times when I went and I was sitting in the hall with one of my friends, my specific small group leader came out to me and she was Joy, you can't keep leaving this, you can't keep leaving these situations that you're in. Instead, you need to start praying harder. This is the devil working in you. And I was I think I'm just overstimulated. And she was no, if you're feeling overstimulated in moments when you should be in communion with Christ, it's an act of the devil. And I'm gonna bring some people out to pray for you, and we're gonna pray this this evil basically spirit out of you in this moment. And I didn't really know what to say to that. I was probably 13 or 14 at the time, and it's not something, it made me initially extremely uncomfortable. Not the idea of prayer, but this idea that maybe I was feeling this way because I had a demon in me, even though I felt I hadn't done anything that would warrant me having a demon in me. And so I had all of these adults come out from this room, and they were all sitting around me, and they all were laying hands on me and basically yelling and calling this demon or this devilish spirit out of me. And it made me feel so much worse. It made my anxiety go through the roof. And I started crying, and I was like, I asked them to stop because I was getting so overwhelmed and I felt so sick. And they like looked at me, and I so distinctly remember my youth pastor like looking me in the eyes and going, Joy, the reason you're feeling like this is because you don't have strong enough faith in this moment. You have to try. You have to want to be better. And if you aren't getting better, it's because you're not praying hard enough. It's because you don't want to be better. And you're okay sitting in sin. And I distinctly remember that actually like taking the biggest blow to my faith in that moment, because I was like, I don't want to feel this way. I never want to feel the way that I feel in this moment. I hate feeling sick. I don't want to miss out on this thing that everyone else can like feel so communed with Christ in this moment. Like, why do I have to feel that way? If it's really about prayer, I probably wouldn't feel this way. Like, I've prayed it so many times that I wouldn't struggle with these feelings. And so being told in that moment that it was my fault, basically, that it wasn't improving, made me feel like, if that's really the case, like, why am I even trying to be a Christian? Why am I even trying to be in communion with this God that seemingly doesn't care at all about how my physical body and my physical well-being? And why am I trying to be a part of this church community that is basically so against me and isn't trying to find solutions to help, but is instead like just throwing all of these words at me and telling me that I'm not trying hard enough as a 13-year-old or 14-year-old. And it was really impactful to me, like, in my mental health journey, and made me feel like such a failure as a Christian in that moment. And then for a long time afterwards of wrestling with, why would I have anxiety, and how can I have anxiety and be a Christian at the same time, when I'm being told so often that those are so in parallel to each other or in contrast. And so, like, that was something I really wrestled with for a long time, and it actually made me feel extremely distanced from my church and from the people there, because it seemed like such an unsafe space. And whenever I needed to take a break or sit out from something because I was just overwhelmed, I always felt like, well, I'm like betraying my faith, basically. I'm choosing to not invest in my relationship with Christ. Like, all of these things are my fault. And it damaged my like view of myself as well, because I was like, why am I so weak that I can't make these things change? When really, like, anxiety is, for the most part, a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's not something that really can be controlled. Like, there's medication that people can take, and there's different practices that you can use, and different like kind of things that you can do to calm down your body. But overall, it's not something that is just gonna go away. Like, there is such a thing as a miracle, and I believe that Christ could perform a miracle on those things, but it's not really something that, like, he needs to necessarily be healed. It's not something that I can't, like, deal with his help, and it's not something that should make me feel, like, distanced from him. In fact, I think that now that I'm older, like, I've been able to see that having different mental health problems actually has helped strengthen my relationship with Christ in a lot of ways, because it forces me to be so reliant on him when I otherwise might be a lot more self-sufficient. But, like, having to deal with that and feeling those negative, like, attitudes from the church, it caused me to, like, really withdraw from a lot of the church body that I had been so connected to, because I felt like such a failure, and I felt like every time I tried to talk about my own concerns or things that I was struggling with, that it was turned around on me and made to be like my own fault, and that I had a lack of faith in these things. And so, like, as I got older, I really drew away from the church in a lot of ways, because I felt so isolated in my own problems, and I never felt like, I feel like I've talked to, like, a lot of people in the church who have also struggled with mental health problems, and they've also felt very similarly that in the church, mental health problems are considered to be almost sinful, or they're considered to be a lack of faith or a lack of prayer, as though we want to have anxiety or depression or whatever other mental health issues that there might be. Like, you wouldn't say that to somebody who has cancer, or you wouldn't say that to somebody who struggles with, like, severe asthma or something like that. If you wouldn't say it to somebody with a physical ailment, why would you say it to somebody with a mental ailment? But here we are, and that's how it's treated, and it's treated like this lack of faith, and it's treated like something that differentiates you from other people around you, as though people around you aren't struggling with mental health issues as well. Like, it's such an isolating thing to have to go through, and it makes you question your faith when it could be something that draws you closer. And I think the point of the church is to draw you closer to Christ as well. And when the church is what's telling you that you are not having enough faith, instead of coming alongside you in that, that is so damaging. And I think it does the exact opposite of what Christ would do. I firmly believe, like, I would have loved to have somebody just sit down with me and pray through my anxiety with me, or just be like, what are the things that are bothering you right now? What are the things that I can do to help with those things? And how can I, like, as a Christian, show Christ's love to you in these moments? I think that would have been that would have been so much more helpful to me than to have somebody basically tell me that, like, my anxiety was a demon. And, like, I've had anxiety since then. I probably will have anxiety forever. But it's not something that I should be made to feel like pulls me away from Christ, or that I deserve to have happen to me, or that it's something that I'm causing to have happen to me. And so having, like, the church basically step in and intervene in a way that pushes me even farther away is so unhelpful and hurtful. And, like, if you think about in scripture how Christ related to people who were struggling with different things, both physical and, like, mental ailments, it was never an accusation on them. It was always a prayer for them. It was always a finding solution and, like, coming alongside. It was always an act of support and never an act of condemnation. And I think that is honestly a big lack that I've seen from the church, is like coming alongside. I've seen a lot of condemnation. And I think it's often a lot easier to condemn people than to find solutions and come alongside. And it's a lot easier to often just kind of put something on somebody else than to actually try and figure out how to step in. And it takes a lot more time to step in and to walk alongside than it does to say a quick word at them and then walk away. And so I think that having that happen was extremely damaging to me in my faith walk and in my relationship with, like, the church as a whole. And it's made it really hard for me to trust different churches, and especially, like, people in church leadership as well, because why would I feel comfortable coming forward to talk about different issues I'm dealing with when all I've ever felt is it thrown back at me? And it's really hard now as an adult with, like, bigger issues and more serious questions that I wish I felt comfortable talking to different people about, but there's always this underlying fear of being told that it's my own fault, or that it's my own failures that got me to the place that I even have questions about things. So, yeah. If I met somebody as a Christian and who was a Christian struggling with mental health problems, I think the thing that I would suggest to them the most, or hope that they take away, is thinking about the character that they know of Christ himself, and thinking about how he treated people in his day-to-day life, and not thinking about what the people around them might say or what the people around them might think, because they, as much as Christians are attempting to be Christ-like, we are sinful, and we say things out of turn, and we're selfish. But Christ wasn't any of those things. And I think being able to see his love and his support truly is the best thing that you can have for mental health. Like, that's not saying that he will immediately take it away, but knowing that there's somebody who's walking alongside you and who supports you as you go through hardships and as you struggle is so peaceful. And I don't believe that mental health issues just go away. I believe, though, that there are things that people can do that will help you. And I think that there's things that you can do that will help yourself. And I think one of the biggest is just knowing that people say insensitive things. People don't understand your mind, even other people with mental health problems. Everyone's problems are so individual to their own, but Christ does know your mind. And he is the person that you can complain to and you can cry to, and he'll listen. And that's just how it is. And I think that that's such a peaceful thing that you can rest in as a Christian and as somebody who struggles with mental health problems.